right. So I'm going to call this meeting of the Canmore Planning Commission to order. And I'll start with a land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge and appreciate that we are meeting today in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This land is the traditional territory and home of the Stoney Nakoda nations of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki, the Blackfoot Confederacy of the Siksika, Kainai, and Pagani, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the District 4 Métis from the Battle River Territory. And as we gather today in this Treaty 7 territory, we acknowledge that we're all treaty people. I commit to work to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation, and acknowledge the many First Nations whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. Before adoption of the agenda, I would ask that each member of Town's administration in attendance today to introduce themselves. Oh, I have to hit it for you, sorry.
Briar Jones, Secretary.
Harry Schneider, Manager, Planning and Development.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Whitney Smithers, and I'll be the chair for this hearing, and all questions and comments should be directed through me. And now I'll have the board members introduce themselves, starting on my immediate left.
Florian Youngin, Public Representative.
Jeff Hillstead, Council Rep.
Joanna McCallum, Council Rep.
Thank you. So I will ask, my name, I already said that part, never mind. So for the secretary, I'll ask if there are any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda as provided today.
Yes, there is an amendment to Schedule A that Nathan will speak to on the agenda.
Okay, so I think what we'll do then is approve the agenda as presented, and then when we get to that report, we'll make that amendment. Okay, so all in favor of the agenda as presented? Okay, that's carried unanimously. And now to the minutes. So again, I'll ask the secretary if there are any additions, deletions, or changes to the minutes of November 28th, 2024.
There was one spelling mistake of Councillor Hildstad's last name, so that will be edited. But otherwise, for the minutes as provided.
Okay, thank you. Any other amendments to the minutes? No? Okay, so with that, I will move that Commission approve the minutes of November 28th, 2024 as amended. Those in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously as well. Thank you, everyone. So the process this afternoon will be as follows. Administration will make a presentation on the matter before the Commission. Then Commission members can ask questions of clarification of administration. At the Commission's discretion, the applicant may be asked to make a presentation of their application. So when we get there, if you choose to make a presentation, you'll have that ability. And then the Commission may ask questions of the applicant. So with that, I will ask that the development officer make their presentation on the application. Mr. Gravel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the CPC, those watching remotely. As mentioned, my name is Nathan Gravel. I'm Senior Development Planner for the Town of Canmore. For this application, I'll begin with a bit of site context. The site is located at 802-806 10th Street. The slide shows the location as well as what's currently around it. Adjacent to the site, to the north, is a skating pond. There's a vacant commercial piece of land to the east, commercial shopping mall to the south across 10th Street, and a vacant lot approved for visitor accommodation development just recently to the west. Just a high-level summary of the application before we get into the details. The application proposes 3 at-grade retail sales units and 13 visitor accommodation units above the main floor. all contained within a single building. 6 variances to the land use bylaw are required, and administration supports the variances and the proposed development. As mentioned, the proposed uses are visitor accommodation and retail sales. Both of these uses are permitted uses in the town center district. Having a look at the built form of the development, as mentioned, it's a single building. The building is 3 stories in height. The design is a nice blend of traditional and modern mountain architecture with a good variation in color and detail. Strong corner feature has also been included in the design, which provides some pedestrian seating, shelter, and a distinct look, and that's shown in the top left image up on the screen. Administration is satisfied with the architecture of the building and believes that it satisfies the requirements of the land use bylaw. Moving on to site design, the building is located adjacent to 10th Street and 7th Avenue. Behind the building is the parking area. And this area is accessed from the lane. A small patio, sort of landscaped area is also included in the design and is located in the northeast corner. So looking at compliance with the land use bylaw, the application does require, as I mentioned, 6 variances. This includes to the front build-to line requirements, to maximum building projections, maximum building height, minimum water body setback, minimum vehicle parking stalls, and the minimum corner visibility triangle setback. I'm probably not going to dive into the building projections piece. It's, I think, clearly handled in the staff report, but if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to speak to that at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the front build-to line variance. So the land use bylaw establishes a 1 meter built-to line in the TC district, which with some requirement for articulation, 20 to 40% of the facade should be articulated back to create some interest. The building itself is set between 1 meter and 5 centimeters and 1 meter and 6 meters, so it's a very minor deviation from the requirement. And the corner feature itself is actually closer to the front property line. It's 80 centimeters back. So there's a little bit of variation there, so it doesn't quite meet the standard, but overall administration is satisfied that it's meeting the intent still of what we're trying to do. There's lots of articulation along the frontage. The corner feature, which is closer to the property line, actually provides a bit of a benefit with the pedestrian seating and so forth. So administration feels that the variance is minor and supports it. Since there's 5 or 6 variances here, it might be helpful if you have questions, just jump in on each one if you like, just so we can keep the slide up. Moving on, the variance to maximum building height. So the height max in the area is 11 meters for the roof and 7 meters for the eave. The proposed development is 11 meters and 20 centimeters high in roof height, and the eave height is generally compliant it's compliant along the front of the building, but the interior, the back, essentially there really is no eave. The roof height and the eave line are the same. So it's up to 11 meters and 20 centimeters as well. So same as the roof height in terms of the variance, which is 20 centimeters. The land use bylaw does allow for height variances to be considered based on impacts to lighting, views, and privacy. Those are kind of the key considerations whenever we look at a height variance. In this case, given the height increase is rather small, it's half a foot, administration, in our opinion, doesn't really feel it impacts adjacent properties in respect to those pieces in terms of lighting, privacy, access to views. The eave line variance is interior to the site. It's on the back of the building. So again, administration doesn't feel it has any meaningful impact on adjacent properties. Here's just a visual of the two. So the lowest green line represents the maximum eave line height, which the front of the building is compliant with, whereas the back, as I mentioned, the roof and the eave are essentially the same. So that's where the eave line variance comes in, and then the roof overall is a little bit taller, as you can see from the higher green line. As I said, in administration's opinion, it's a minor variance, and so we are supporting it. Moving on to the water body setback, the LUB does require that development be set back 20 meters from a water body, with a possible 5-meter variance for commercial buildings if the remaining area enhances the riparian habitat or is landscaped or is really not causing any significant impact here, right? There's a focus here on the protection of the creek and the riparian area. The proposed building does encroach into that 20-meter setback. I'll just show here for added clarity. A corner of the building encroaches within the 20 meters, including its eave. It's 1.22 meters into the 20 meters. And the waste area is 4.3 meters in there within the 20-meter setback area as well. So in response, we asked the developer to prepare a environmental impact statement to evaluate the development, where everything is located, and the adjacency to the creek. The statement prepared concluded that the development doesn't propose any harm to the riparian area. The drainage will all be handled on site, so there's not going to be anything leaking towards the creek. From the site, we did have the EIS reviewed by our third-party environmental consultant, and they concurred with that assessment. Just for note, the third party did raise that there could be creek bank enhancements made as part of this application by the developer, which was something the EIS said was not possible, but administration has reviewed that recommendation and feels that given there's a laneway between the site doesn't have direct access to the riparian area, and also the pond is actively used by the public as an amenity, it wouldn't really be fair to place the enhancement on the developer. There are a couple minor discrepancies in the EIS that we want updated for accuracy. They don't affect the outcome of the recommendations, but that's why a condition of approval was added to the Schedule A regarding the EIS, is just to have their consultant update the report in response to the third-party assessments report and recommendations. All right, moving on to parking. Vehicle parking. So the development's required to provide 19 vehicle parking stalls, 16 are proposed. The remaining 3 stalls will be provided through cash in lieu, which is permitted in the TC district. Administration doesn't have any objections to cash in lieu. The number of stalls is quite small. And again, it is an option that can be considered in the TC district. The applicant is considering a mural in the rear yard, which is actually the location of which is shown up on the screen on what would be the firewall. This is intended to enhance the pedestrian realm a little bit, as obviously people will be walking by that part of the building to access the pond. And so administration recommends that CPC approve a reduction of up to 1 parking stall for the mural. So instead of 2 or 3 parking stalls paid through cash in lieu, would be 2. And CPC is the authority for that reduction, and one of the reason why the application is actually coming to CPC today is that piece. So, and the applicant is obviously here today, so they can speak more to the details of the mural if there are questions about that. As you'll notice in the Schedule A, a condition has been added to ensure the mural is provided, or there'll be a security deposit provided should the mural not be. That will pay the cash in lieu. So either they do the mural or we use the security to pay any remaining cash in lieu. And finally, in terms of variances, the corner visibility triangle setback. So the LUB restricts structures between 1 meter and 4 meters in height within the corner visibility triangle, which is just a setback from the intersection to allow for visibility. The applicant is proposing an eave at 3.34 meters in height that encroaches into the setback. That's part of the corner feature. I'll just show that up on the screen there. So it's that piece that's within the red circle there. A transportation engineer on behalf of the applicant assessed the impacts of this and indicated from their analysis it won't impact visibility at 10th Street and 7th Avenue, which the town's engineering department has accepted. So as a result, administration has no objections to the proposed variance. With regards to what we heard from the public, a notice of application was posted on the site for 10 days as required. Administration received feedback from 2 residents. Their concerns were related to the loss of rental housing in the community. The Development Authority does not have the ability to require rental housing from the landowner or require that the landowner maintain the existing rental housing. Given the proposed application, these are permitted uses. There are some variances that are needed for the application, but they are, in administration's opinion, minor, so they're not drastically changing the intent of what was envisioned for those uses. So given that, there's really no opportunity to get rental housing in this development unless the applicant volunteered it, which they're not in this case. Looking at the SSR, the Sustainability Screening Report, the applicant's Sustainability Screening Report scores 3, suggesting the development will have a slightly positive impact on the community. There's nothing really to highlight in the SSR, either as a big impact or a big offset. So I will move on to the recommendation, which is that administration recommends that the Canmore Planning Commission approve PL 2024-0082. The project does align with the intent of the Town Centre District, and the proposed variances are considered, in administration's opinion, minor. Should the Commission decide to approve this application, draft conditions of approval have been prepared and set out in the Schedule A. And you have a updated Schedule A in front of you for 2 reasons. One, there was a numbering error on it, so that's been corrected. And the other is the applicant wanted the timing of the EIS updates changed from prior to the release of the development permit to prior to construction, which is, from my understanding, they can speak to that more, but due to the availability of their environmental consultant in the coming months. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gravel. And just to be clear, those were the only 2 changes in the amended
That's correct.
schedule that's in front of us?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the Development Authority or for the Development Officer? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Gravel. I was just curious, with regards to the mural, is there going to be any municipal oversight as to what is on the mural?
So the land use bylaw would provide guidance in terms of how big and so forth for the mural. Signage is discretionary, so in that regard, the town would have the ultimate say
Gotcha.
on it.
So it's considered signage. That's what I was curious about.
And it
Thank
will
you so
require a
much.
separate development permit.
Perfect.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Youngden.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel, for your presentation. I take it that you've made the assessment that the value of the mural versus cash in lieu is a fair balance in terms of community benefit?
Yes, in my opinion it is, yes. Just given the adjacency of the skating pond, and there's a lot of activity in that area. Also, it's become part of 10th Street's identity, in my opinion, the murals. There's a lot of them there, and it's going to be harder to ensure a mural just based on the footprint of new development, firewalls and things like that to get them. So in my opinion, yes, this is a really good thing and worth 1 stall reduction.
The adjacent development that's getting the mural, is that by the same applicant? Like, are they getting credit for sort of improving a condition that they created?
So the firewall is the adjacent parcels that will be used as the base for the mural. They provided with their development permit just basic alterations to the firewall to make sure it wasn't a blank wall. There's no requirement in the land use bylaw for a mural as part of any firewall development, which makes this a good opportunity to explore. Should they not be able to work it out with the adjacent landowner in terms of how it's accessed and whatever arrangement they need to come to, then the applicant would just pay out the full 3 stalls in cash in lieu. So,
I guess my question was, is it the same landowner? So, you know, is this development getting credit for enhancing a condition that was created by the same landowner? Or those?
So the adjacent landowner was the first to develop, and the expectation is that the development here would generally mirror what's there for firewall. They've chosen more of an L shape than a box shape, which leaves some exposed firewall. The challenge is it's not their firewall, so they can't propose a mural commit to it in full right now. They have to work out those details. They are creating a condition, yes, through the way they have designed the building, but there are a lot of constraints on the site in terms of it's questionable whether or not any underground parking is feasible. And so the parking has to go on the surface somewhere. So it starts to really dictate where or how the building is laid out and functioned. So I don't know if they're creating the condition intentionally or if it's a result of the land use bylaw itself outputting this type of design. But from administration's perspective, it's the adjacent property's firewall. So they'll have to work something out if they're going to be able to do the mural, but regardless, the town will get compliance in terms of parking. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor McCallum.
Sorry, a couple more questions that just came to mind. The parking, the assigned is the parking assigned? So there are 13 visitor comm units. Will there be a parking stall assigned to each visitor comm unit?
The town doesn't manage the parking piece.
No, I understand
so
that.
it'd be a good question
For the applicant, I can do that. And I noted that delivery vehicles are going to be restricted from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. maybe, or 10 a.m. There's something within there that
Yes.
restricts because they don't have a loading spot. That's not
That's
the word.
correct.
Parking
So
stall,
they don't-
loading stall, sorry, that was the word I was searching for. So what is it that, is it within the approval that that is policed? Or in terms of when the delivery vehicles come down the alley to service the retail properties?
So it's at your discretion whether or not they can have off-site loading, which is what they're proposing in this case. They're proposing loading from the lane.
Yeah,
With the challenge being just access to the site.
right.
And the engineering department feels that it's okay for them to load off-site, that the loading vehicles themselves don't cause a lot of noise. And so their primary concern is more disruption to traffic.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
why
that's actually exactly what I'm zeroing in on. I'm just trying to find here within the report.
So there is a condition of approval that limits.
Okay, so, Elaine, loading is permitted only between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. That was what I was speaking of. So how is that enforced? That's, I guess, my question. Who enforces that that's when the big truck delivering Pepsi shows up?
That would be enforced like any other, like a noise complaint issue or
Okay.
anything else that happens after hours. It would be our bylaw enforcement team who would have to.
I guess,
to
so
look into
when a Pepsi truck shows up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a busy August day, who's the one that says, yo, you're not supposed to do that? Because it's mentioned within the requirements of the application, so that's why I'm
Yeah, no, it's a good
asking the
question.
question.
Yeah, it would be complaint-based. If we got a call, we'd have to respond to it, but to answer your question, nobody is actually going over there to watch.
Okay. And so then back to the parking, I'll ask them a parking question. Thank you so kindly.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Gravel? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if the applicant has a presentation you'd want to give, but there are going to be a couple questions probably. So if you guys want to approach the podium at this point and introduce yourselves.
I'll start. Chad Russell.
Okay, can you come up to the podium, please, because we are live streaming, so then people can hear you. It's a proud moment for everyone.
Hey, Mom. Chad Russell, Principal with Systemic Architecture. I'll let Tanner Allred speak to the application. I might come back up to join, but just to say, we didn't do a separate presentation. I think that we were working closely there with Nathan, and he did a great job covering the bases. We do have a little bit of supplemental stuff depending on the questions that might come up, but primarily we are here just to answer any follow-up questions that you have. So no presentation, but we can cover lots of ground depending on what you want to talk about. And
Okay.
so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks.
So Councillor McCallum, I believe you had a question.
So my questions were about parking. You have 13 visitor accommodation units, and that are in the center of Canmore. There is really no way to get to Canmore right now except by vehicle. And in the town center, parking is tightly policed. So my question is, will there be at least one parking stall per visitor accommodation unit assigned within the internal operations of the, it's not really a hotel, but
Yeah, it's something like a hotel.
yes,
No, there will be 13. There are 13 visitor accommodation units. There will be 13 assigned
okay.
stalls for that purpose. Now, if it's one unit, is this exact stall every time? That's up to.
I'm not worried about that. I just
So
want to
that-
make sure people have a place to
Yeah.
land their car.
So that leaves 3. We have on the site plan 13 dedicated ones for visitor accommodations, and then 3 for retail.
I do like your parking site plan within the building, by the way. I think it's, when you have such a high water table, it's a great way, so it's not a big block. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And then my other question is that, so with 13 visitor accommodation units, you have 13 units that will need to be cleaned. And I'm curious, with employee housing being a discretionary use, if, why you decided not to include any employee housing to service those rooms?
Well, the service of the rooms is typically from a third party. If there is a room that needs to be cleaned, there's no one there, which
Right.
means there's a stall kind of open, and these cleaning, in my experience, the cleaning vehicles that come in just use whatever stall is assigned to that particular unit.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the parking
Yeah.
part about that. I'm just wanting to make sure that there's
Employee
actually
housing?
housing for people to actually clean your room, and on site's generally the most
Yeah, that's-
economical way of doing it.
Fair enough. The owner would probably have that opportunity at some point to kind of get a new development permit issued if you wanted to add that. It's not something
Right.
that I can really speak to be honest.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions of the applicant, Mr. Youngan?
In terms of the architectural expression, could you just give us like a very brief rationale? Is the building intended to kind of evoke some kind of historical context within the community, or is this, I don't know, like a modern farmhouse style? Just very briefly.
Sure. I do have some photos if needed, if you want to see them, but, and Nathan, perhaps you could help me out with that. I think it might help. Just pop this thing in there.
Probably, oh, I don't know if mine there. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
It will be brief, but I still think an image would be useful.
I'm sure IT is cringing somewhere with you. Maybe.
We just got the new system and it's befuddling sometimes.
Okay.
Has that-
I will
there
take
it
the
is.
opportunity to remind people that generally, when an applicant has materials, we'd prefer them to bring their own laptop in and hook it up. We don't
Okay.
really want random USBs being plugged into the system.
Okay. Apologies for that. So the kind of the mining heritage in Canmore was kind of where we started. Early on in the process, we were looking at these types of buildings because they're kind of basic forms. This is an example of kind of industrial with the kind of vertical board and batten, the really tall kind of industrial style windows. And this is a rail kind of car station. Yeah, exactly. And so you can clearly see that's kind of where the windows came in. So these basic ideas were the genesis of the form that you see.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to handle this, or?
Yeah, Mr. Gravel, I might get you to pull the recommendation back up on screen.
Take it out.
Okay. There you go. Go for it.
Thank you, and then I'll also ask if you have any closing remarks or comments on this.
Nope.
No?
none.
Okay, great, thanks. So, with that then, just to start the conversation going, I will move that Canmore Planning Commission approve PL 2024-0082. Sorry, I lost my page over here. Subject to the conditions of approval as set out in the amended Schedule A. So with that, are there any comments? Councillor McCallum.
I would be prepared to support this application. I think it fits in that corner, and the variances are minor, as described. I'm happy to hear that the mural will require a DP. And my only detraction to the project, which is immaterial, is that there isn't employee housing when we have a 0% vacancy rate in Canmore, and that does not bode well for the business model. But so otherwise, I will be supporting this application.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hillstad.
I also be able to support this. Again, I think it's fairly well thought out. There's, as admin has said, most of the variances are fairly minor. Some of them are just site constraint based, it just is what it is. So I will be able to support.
Thank you, and Mr. Yangan.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in agreement with the other commission members. I think this project is very successful. I think the architecture is successful in being sort of sensitive to the context, really successful in breaking up the massing. I think the corner will be enhanced by this development, having commercial development and intensification of the downtown are all positive things. I agree that, you know, it's unfortunate that we're losing rental housing and we're not gaining employee housing. Unfortunately, the Planning Commission doesn't really have any way to influence that. I think the variances proposed actually enhance the project. And lastly, just a comment about architecture and the community design guidelines in Part 11 of the land use bylaw. You know, if you looked at the letter of the law of the bylaw, then this application might not tick all the boxes. I think like the black and white color scheme is probably discouraged if you look at the letter of the law. I think like the portion of flat roof would not be encouraged. And I think, yet I think this is a very successful sort of architectural proposal. I like the way that the corner is articulated. There's even an opportunity for, you know, people sort of occupy the building in a way. So it just goes to show that successful architectural proposals don't rely on following the letter of the bylaw. I think it's important that we are flexible in how we apply architectural guidelines. And I would be in favor actually of those guidelines being maybe updated or becoming maybe more of a living document or being updated at some point. I think at this point they might be decades old, and I think it's important to kind of let the architectural traditions of the community evolve. And I think this proposal is a really good example of how that can happen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, the motion is to approve PL 2024-0082, subject to the conditions of approval set out in the amended Schedule A. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So there was no other business on the agenda, so now I'll just ask the secretary when the Planning Commission's next scheduled meeting is.
Wednesday, January 29th at 2 p.m.
Okay, thank you for that. And then with that, I will move that the commission adjourn the, can't speak anymore. I know, right? That commission adjourn the December 11th, 2024 Canmore Planning Commission meeting. All those in favor? And we